Somewhere tonight, two people are about to have the same dream. They don't know it yet. One of them is asleep already. The other is lying awake, listening to the rain. By morning, they will sit across a table from each other, and one of them will say, "I had the strangest dream," and start describing it, and the other one will slowly put down their cup, because it's their dream. The same house, the same water, the same person standing in the doorway who shouldn't be there. If this has never happened to you, it has happened to someone you know. Ask around. Couples who dream of the same flood on the same night. A mother who wakes at 3 in the morning, certain something is wrong with her son, and the phone rings. Two friends who haven't spoken in years, who message each other in the same hour with the same words. You think of someone specific, someone you had no reason to think of, and before the thought has even faded, your phone lights up with their name. And no one tells these stories, like twins. Identical twins report them constantly, waking in the night with pain when the other is injured in another city, buying the same gift for their mother in the same week from opposite ends of the country. And yes, the same dream on the same night, detailed enough to frighten them both. Ask a twin, and you'll usually get a story within a minute, told with a shrug, the way you'd describe the weather. For them, it's not a mystery. It's Tuesday. Hold on to the twins. They'll come back at the very end of tonight, and when they do, they'll turn out to be the biggest clue in the whole case. We have a small, dismissive word for this, coincidence, and we have a large, glittering word for it too, synchronicity. And underneath both words sits one quiet question that almost nobody says out loud. What is actually connecting you? And once you really ask it, the questions don't stop. Can two minds actually be linked the way two particles are? Actually, physically entangled across a room, across a whole city? A Nobel Prize winner thought so. Was he right? Did a laboratory at Princeton really spend 28 years proving it? Why do twins get this more than anyone alive? And if it turns out not to be telepathy, not magic, not minds reaching across space, then what is the connection that's left? The one you can actually feel with someone you love? Every one of those has an answer tonight, and not one of them is the answer you're expecting. Tonight I want to answer that question properly. Not with a shrug, and not with a fairy tale. Because there are two stories about what's happening in those moments, and both of them are serious. One story says the universe is stitched together beneath the surface, that quantum physics has already proven that separation is an illusion, that two particles can be linked across a galaxy, and that two minds that love each other might be linked the same way. That story has a Nobel Prize winner in it. It has a Princeton laboratory in it. It has 28 years of data in it. I'm going to tell it to you at full strength, better than the people who believe it usually tell it. The other story is the one working physics actually holds. And I have to warn you now, it does not leave the first story standing. There is a result, proven inside quantum mechanics itself, not outside it, that decides this contest. Not softens it, decides it. But that's not the ending, because when the first story falls, something unexpected is left standing in the wreckage. A real connection, a measurable one. Something happening between your body and the bodies of the people you love that sounds like science fiction and is plain laboratory fact. And it explains the shared dreams, the perfect timing, the phone lighting up, in a way that I honestly find more intimate than telepathy would be. So that's the shape of tonight. Two stories, one question, and an answer at the end that is stranger than the magic and warmer than the debunk. You can close your eyes if you want. You don't need them for this. Just stay with me. Let's begin where synchronicity itself began, in a consulting room in Zurich about 100 years ago. with a locked window and an impossible insect. Carl Jung was, at the time, one of the most famous psychologists alive. He had trained under Freud, broken with Freud, and built his own school of thought in Zurich. People travelled across Europe to sit in his consulting room. One of them was a young woman he found almost impossible to help. She was brilliant. That was the problem. Her mind was a fortress of logic. Every interpretation Jung offered, she dismantled. Every door he opened, she closed with a perfectly rational argument. Jung wrote later that he found himself hoping for something unexpected, something irrational, anything that could crack the polished surface she lived behind. A therapist, privately praying for a miracle he didn't believe in. He was about to get one. One day she was telling him about a dream from the night before. In the dream, someone handed her a piece of golden jewelry, a golden scarab. The scarab beetle, the sacred insect of ancient Egypt, the old symbol of the soul remaking itself, of rebirth. While she was speaking, Jung heard a tapping sound behind him, a soft, insistent knocking at the window. He turned, and there was a flying insect bumping against the glass from the outside, in his words, trying to get into the dark room. He opened the window and caught it in his hand as it flew in. It was a rose chafer, a scarab beetle, gold-green, shimmering, the closest thing to a golden scarab that exists in that part of Europe. Jung held it out to her and said, "Here is your scarab," and her fortress cracked. Jung reported that the moment broke through her rationalism in a way that months of therapy had not, and her treatment finally began to move. Now, I want to be careful with this story, and I'll tell you why later, but first, feel what it's like from the inside, the dream at night, the insect at the window the next day, not a beetle in general, the one species that matches, not some random afternoon, the exact minutes she's describing the dream, the timing perfect, the meaning exact, the odds surely astronomical. Jung collected experiences like this for decades, and two of them deserve to be told in full, because they set the bar for what we're trying to explain tonight. The first he reported from his own practice. The wife of one of his patients told him about a pattern in her family that she'd learned to dread. When her grandmother died, a flock of birds gathered outside the window of the death chamber. When her mother died, the same thing. Birds arriving, settling on the house. Years later, her husband, Jung's patient, went for a medical checkup. The doctor found nothing alarming and sent him home. On the walk back, the man collapsed in the street with a heart attack and was carried home dying. His wife, Jung wrote, was already in a state of terror before anyone reached her, because shortly after her husband had left for the doctor, a whole flock of birds had come down and settled on their house. She had seen the omen land on her own roof, third generation in a row, and she knew. The second is older, and it was collected not by Jung, but by the French astronomer Camille Flammarion, from whom Jung borrowed it, and it may be the most absurdly perfect coincidence ever put on paper. A man named Monsieur de Fontgibou, and a plum pudding, and 3 acts. Act 1. As a boy in Orléans, a certain Monsieur Deschamps is given a taste of plum pudding, then a rare, exotic dessert in France by a family acquaintance, Monsieur de Fontgibou. Act 2. 10 years later, Deschamps, now in Paris, spots plum pudding in the window of a restaurant and goes in to order some, only to be told the last of it has just been sold. To whom? The waiter points across the room. To that gentleman there, Monsieur de Fontgibou. Act 3. Many years later still, Deschamps is at a dinner party where plum pudding is served, and he tells this whole story and jokes that the only thing missing from the evening is Monsieur de Fontgibou himself. As he says it, the door opens, and an elderly, confused Monsieur de Fontgibou walks in. He had been invited to a different dinner, in a different apartment, and had entered the wrong door. 3 plum puddings, 1 lifetime, the same man every time. The last arrival summoned, it seems, by the telling of the story itself. Alongside cases like these, Jung logged the smaller daily currency of the thing. Patients who dreamed of a death and got the telegram in the morning. A word he'd never encountered before appearing 3 times in one day, from 3 unconnected directions, and he noticed something about all of them. None of these events caused each other. The dream did not summon the beetle. The beetle did not reach backward into the dream. There was no chain of cause and effect connecting them. There was only the meaning, the way the 2 events fit together like a lock and key. So Jung coined a word for it: synchronicity. He defined it as a meaningful coincidence, 2 events linked not by causation, but by meaning. And he made a bold claim, bolder than it sounds at first, that these events were not noise, that they were a real feature of the world. That alongside cause and effect, the universe might contain a second organizing principle, and a causal connecting principle, that binds events together by significance instead of by force. And Jung wasn't even the first scientist to be captured by this. He had predecessors, and their stories deepen the mystery before we ever touch physics. In Vienna, a generation earlier, a biologist named Paul Kammerer spent 20 years keeping what may be the strangest notebook in the history of science. A logbook of coincidences. Nothing mystical about his method, he simply wrote them down. His brother-in-law attends a concert. His seat number and his cloakroom ticket both carry the same number. And the next day, at a different concert, it happens again with a different number. The same word, the same figure, the same name, surfacing in clusters, on a tram, in a shop, in a book opened at random, then vanishing for months. Kammerer sat on park benches for hours with a notepad, tallying passers-by, hunting for the rhythm in how types of people arrived. Not evenly spread, he claimed, but in runs. In 1919, he published a book arguing that coincidences aren't spread smoothly through time. They come in waves. He called his idea the law of seriality, and he pictured something like an undiscovered force of nature, a pull toward likeness, gathering similar things together in time, the way gravity gathers matter together in space. Mainstream science shrugged. But one reader took him seriously enough to say so in print, Albert Einstein, who reportedly called the idea original and by no means absurd. And before Kammerer, there was the strangest research project of the Victorian age. In the 1880s, a group of Cambridge scholars, respected philosophers and scientists, not séance parlour cranks, founded the Society for Psychical Research and took on the mother of all these experiences, the crisis coincidence. You already know its shape because it's the 3 a.m. story. Someone wakes in the night, gripped by the certainty that a specific person is in danger, or dreams of them, vividly, standing at the foot of the bed, and learns afterward that, at that hour, far away, the person was dying. The society did the one thing nobody had done with such stories before. They counted. They collected thousands of first-hand reports, interviewed the witnesses, chased the paperwork, death records, telegrams, timestamps, letters written before the news arrived. In 1886, they published the results in a 2-volume monster of a book called Phantasms of the Living, over 700 documented cases. Then they went further and ran what may be the first large statistical survey in the history of psychology, a census that put a simple question to 17,000 people. Have you ever, while fully awake, vividly sensed a person who wasn't there? About 1 in 10 said yes. And when the researchers pulled out the cases where the sensed person had died within 12 hours of the experience, they calculated that such matches occurred hundreds of times more often than chance should allow, even after they threw out every case with an obvious explanation. Now, the flaws in that Victorian method will matter later tonight. Memory is not a measuring instrument, and we'll come back to exactly why. But absorb what these early collectors establish, because it's the honest part of their legacy. The experience itself is real, massive, and everywhere. This is not a modern internet phenomenon, and not a fringe one. Across every era that has bothered to ask, a large fraction of ordinary, sane, reliable people report these moments. The shared dream, the 3A, certainty. Whatever the explanation turns out to be, it has to be big enough to cover all of that. Jung knew this literature. He added his consulting room to it. And then he did the thing none of the earlier collectors could do. He recruited physics. Because Jung didn't publish his theory alone, he published it with one of the greatest physicists who ever lived. So how does one of the most feared minds in physics end up inside a story about shared dreams? Stay with that, because his answer is stranger than the dreams. Wolfgang Pauli was not a gentle presence in physics. He was Viennese, ferociously sharp, and famous for reviewing other physicists' work with lines that are still quoted a century later, including the most brutal dismissal in all of science, reserved for a theory so vague it couldn't even be tested. It is not even wrong. He earned the right to talk like that. At 25, Pauli discovered something now called the exclusion principle. And I want you to actually see what it says, because it's one of the strangest laws in nature, and it will matter again later tonight. In plain words, no two electrons in an atom are allowed to be in exactly the same state. Each one must differ from every other. That's it. That's the whole law. It doesn't work by pushing. There's no force involved, no signal, no mechanism. It is simply a rule about what reality permits, and it's the reason atoms have structure, the reason chemistry exists, the reason the floor holds you up instead of letting you fall through. In 1945, it won him the Nobel Prize. Einstein himself proposed the toast. Sit with how strange that rule is for a second. Not a force, not a push, not a signal, just a flat refusal built into reality. Two electrons walk up to the same state, and the universe says no. No reason given, no mechanism offered. It simply is not allowed. Hold on to that shape. A law with no mechanism. A constraint with no force behind it. Pauli understood, maybe more sharply than anyone alive, that physics had already found rules that don't work the way common sense says rules should work. And around Pauli there was also folklore. Physicists told each other, half joking, about the Pauli effect, the uncanny tendency of experimental equipment to fail whenever Pauli was near. Instruments died, glassware shattered. The most famous story, and I'll flag it honestly as a story, the kind physicists polish over decades of retelling, says that a piece of apparatus in a Göttingen laboratory collapsed for no reason one afternoon. And when the researchers joked in a letter to Pauli that he must be responsible, the reply came back that Pauli's train from Zurich had been stopped at the Göttingen railway station at that exact hour. His friend Otto Stern, a Nobel-winning experimentalist, reportedly wouldn't let Pauli into his laboratory as a precaution. It was a running joke, except Pauli himself didn't entirely laugh. He noticed that the incidents clustered around his own emotional storms, and his life had storms. His mother's suicide A brief, wrecked marriage. Years of heavy drinking. In the early 1930s, at the height of his scientific powers, Pauli's inner life came apart badly enough that he sought help. The person he went to was Carl Jung. Feel the strangeness of that meeting. On one side, the founder of analytical psychology, a collector of impossible coincidences. On the other, the sharpest critical mind in physics, the man whose nickname was the conscience of physics, the scourge of sloppy thinking, arriving as a patient with a thick folder of his own dreams. Their conversation outlived the therapy. It became a correspondence that ran for over 25 years, hundreds of letters, two men circling one question from opposite sides. Is there a level of reality where mind and matter are not separate things? And in 1952 they did something that risked both their reputations. They published a book together. 1 volume, 2 long essays. Jung's essay laying out synchronicity as a serious hypothesis, and Pauli's essay arguing that deep physics has never been free of the psyche, that even Kepler's laws of planetary motion were born from images and symbols in Kepler's mind before they were ever equations. Jung, in that essay, made his definition precise. A true synchronicity needs 3 things. First, 2 events close together in time. Second, no causal connection between them. Nothing links them by force, signal, or mechanism. Third, shared meaning. The events fit together in a way that matters to the person living them. Take away any one of the 3, and you have something ordinary, a fluke, a lucky guess, a plain sequence of cause and effect. With all 3, Jung claimed, you are looking at the universe's other organizing principle showing itself. Why did Pauli, of all people, take this seriously? Because of what he had helped discover. Quantum mechanics, the physics Pauli helped build, had already forced physicists to accept correlations without mechanisms. His own exclusion principle was one. And by mid-century, the theory contained something even more disturbing, something Einstein had spent years attacking precisely because it looked like magic. The prediction that 2 particles, once they've interacted, stay correlated, no matter how far apart they travel. Measure one, and the other's result is instantly fixed, across a room, across a galaxy, with no signal passing between them, no time for one to warn the other. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance, and he meant it as an accusation. We now know, and this is solid, decided physics, confirmed in experiment after experiment, and honoured with the 2022 Nobel Prize, that Einstein lost that argument. The correlations are real. Entanglement is real. I've walked through that whole battle, Bell's theorem, and the experiments that settled it, in another video on this channel. So tonight, I'll keep it to 1 sentence. The universe, at its foundation, provably contains connections that no local, mechanical story can explain. Now you can see the bridge Pauli was staring at. Physics. Correlation without mechanism, proven. Jung's consulting room. Correlation without mechanism, reported. 2 entangled particles, linked across space by no force at all. 2 entangled people, a mother and a son, 2 friends, 2 sleepers, sharing a dream, linked across a city by no force at all. Pauli wondered, in letter after letter, whether these were 2 faces of one principle. Whether mind and matter were complementary, his word, borrowed from the deepest part of quantum theory, 2 descriptions of a single underlying reality. The way wave and particle are 2 descriptions of a single electron, and their collaboration went deeper than letters. Over the years, Pauli handed Jung's circle a record of more than 1,000 of his own dreams, one of the largest dream archives ever kept by a single person. Jung built an entire book around a long series of them, presenting the dreamer only as a scientifically educated younger man, never naming him. The world found out decades later who the anonymous dreamer was. The dreams filling one of Jung's most famous case studies belonged to a Nobel laureate in physics. Pauli dreamed in the language of his own science, dreams of a world clock with interlocking rings, of mirrors, of a mysterious dark figure he called the Persian, dreams about symmetry and its violation that he sometimes connected to the physics he was doing by day. The sharpest rationalist of his generation spent a quarter of a century treating his own dream life as data. He never claimed synchronicity was proven. He was Pauli. He knew exactly what proof was. He called it a program for the future, and then reality gave his biography an ending that no novelist would dare write. Pauli was haunted his whole life by one number, 137. Not for mystical reasons, for physical ones. There's a number at the heart of nature called the fine structure constant. It sets the strength of light's grip on matter, and it comes out from measurement, not from any theory, to almost exactly 1 divided by 137. Nobody knows why. It's a pure number, no units, the same everywhere in the universe, and physics cannot derive it. Pauli called explaining it one of the deepest unsolved problems there is, and he chased it for years. In December of 1958, he fell ill at a lecture and was taken to a hospital in Zurich. His assistant came to visit. Pauli, from the bed, asked him, "Did you see the number on the door as you came in?" It was room 137. He died in that room a few days later. Physics folklore has polished that story too, and I give it to you as what it is, a true room number wrapped in 50 years of telling. But you can see why physicists still repeat it in lowered voices. The man who co-wrote the book on meaningful coincidence died inside one, and here is where the first story picks up speed. Because in the decades after both men died, people started building laboratories to test it. If minds can correlate with the world without any mechanism, you should be able to measure it. So someone did, for 28 years, at Princeton. Here's the question I couldn't shake reading about this next one. What makes a hard-nosed rocket scientist stake his reputation on measuring a wish? In 1979, the Dean of Engineering at Princeton University did something that made his colleagues wince. His name was Robert Jung, and his credentials were not soft. He was an aerospace scientist, a leading figure in advanced spacecraft propulsion, author of a standard textbook in the field, someone whose working life was rocket engines and plasma physics. And he opened, in the basement of Princeton's engineering school, a laboratory with a deliberately boring name, the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab, PEAR. Its actual mission was anything but boring. Jung wanted to test, with engineering-grade rigor, whether human intention, just wanting, could nudge a physical machine. The machine at the heart of it was a random event generator. Think of it as an electronic coin flipper with no coin, a circuit whose output rides on raw electronic noise, spitting out an endless stream of ones and zeros, each one unpredictable. The whole stream averaging out to 50-50. No skill can bias it. No trick can anticipate it. It is, by design, the most stubborn object in the building, a machine engineered to ignore you completely. The experiment was almost embarrassingly simple. A volunteer sits near the machine. They don't touch it, they don't speak to it. A screen tells them their task for this run. Intend high, try purely mentally to make more ones appear, or intend low, more zeros, or a baseline run. Don't try at all. The machine runs. The bits are counted. That's the whole experiment. They ran it for 28 years. Hundreds of volunteers, not psychics, not performers, Students, staff, ordinary people, millions of trials. And when the mountain of data was stacked up and analysed, the PEAR team reported this. When people intended high, the ones came out very slightly more often. When they intended low, very slightly less. The effect was tiny, on the order of 1 part in 10,000, a whisper in the noise. Nothing you would ever notice in a single session. But summed over the full database, the PEAR team calculated that a deviation that size and that consistent should not happen by chance. Their headline numbers put the odds at worse than 1 in many millions. Skeptics toured the lab. Protocols were published. The machines were checked, shielded, recalibrated. Jung's position, held calmly for 3 decades, was simple. I'm an engineer. I report what the instruments record. And the electronic coin flipper wasn't even the lab's most theatrical machine. In the PEAR lobby stood a contraption the size of a wall, the random mechanical cascade. Picture a giant upright pinball board, 3 meters tall, faced in clear acrylic. At the top, a hopper releases 9,000 small polystyrene balls, which rain down through a forest of hundreds of pegs, bouncing left and right at random, and pile up in a row of collection bins along the bottom. Physics guarantees the outcome. Run it again and again, and the balls stack into the same bell-shaped mound, tallest in the middle bins, tapering to the edges, randomness drawing its own portrait every time. A volunteer's task was to stand before this waterfall of chaos and will the mound to lean, shift the pile, by pure intention, a little to the right or the left. 9,000 balls, thousands of collisions each, and the PEAR team reported that, summed across sessions, the mounds leaned, faintly, the way the volunteers willed them to. There was one more finding from the basement that the numbers people rarely mention, and it's the one Jung's longtime co-director, the developmental psychologist Brenda Dunn, talked about most. When they asked their best-performing volunteers what it felt like, what they were actually doing in the chair, while the bits streamed by, the volunteers mostly refused the language of doing anything at all. They didn't push the machine, they said. They fell in with it. They described a softening of the boundary, a state where the line between themselves and the device seemed to blur, where they stopped being an operator, commanding an instrument, and became, for a stretch of minutes, something more like one system. The lab took to calling it resonance. Trying hard, gripping, forcing, that, the volunteers reported, produced nothing. The effect, such as it was, seemed to live in the letting go. Keep that texture in mind. Whether or not the numbers survive tonight's cross-examination, and you already know that's coming, that reported feeling of a boundary going soft between a self and a not-self is going to come back near the end of the night, wearing very different clothes. And 2 details from that basement are going to matter enormously tonight, so hold them. First, the effect, the PEAR team reported, did not care about distance. Volunteers ran trials from the next room and from other continents, and the reported deviation didn't shrink. Some trials were even run displaced in time, intention registered hours before the machine generated its bits, and the team reported the effect still showed. Read that the way a believer reads it. No fading with distance, no respect for time's arrow. Exactly the signature of quantum correlation. Exactly what Pauli's bridge predicts. Second, and this is the one that reaches right into your bedroom. When 2 volunteers worked together, the results split in a way nobody had designed for. 2 strangers produced roughly what you'd expect, not much. But 2 people with an emotional bond, couples, close friends, produced. The team reported an effect several times larger than the two of them managed separately. The machine, remember, is a box of electronics. It has no idea who is sitting near it, and yet, on the PEAR team's numbers, it responded to love, to bondedness, as if connection between two minds were not a metaphor but a physical variable. Sit anywhere you like on the skepticism spectrum. We will do the hard-nosed accounting later, and I promise you it has teeth. But the first story have its moment, because it's not done. If bonded pairs can move a machine in a basement, what happens when millions of minds bond at once? Someone measured that too. And then someone asked the obvious next question. If one person wanting could nudge a machine, what could a whole planet feeling the same thing at once do? Roger Nelson had worked inside the PEAR lab for years. In 1998, he scaled that question up to the size of the Earth. The idea was called the Global Consciousness Project. Take the same kind of random event generators and plant them around the world, in universities, offices, homes. A network that grew to dozens of devices across the continents. Leave them running around the clock, every second of every day, each one privately flipping its electronic coins, each stream independent of all the others. Then wait for moments when humanity feels something together and check whether the machines notice. Under normal conditions, they behave exactly as physics says they must. Dozens of independent streams of noise, uncorrelated, flat. But the project's hypothesis was that during events of massive shared attention, moments when millions of human minds lock onto the same thing at the same time with real emotion, the network would drift, subtly, away from pure randomness. The separate machines would begin, faintly, to move together. The hardware is worth a moment, because its ordinariness is the point. Each node in the network is a small box plugged into a computer, a chip generating randomness from raw physical noise, and the microscopic electronic jitter that no algorithm produces and none can predict. Each box runs a trial every second, around the clock. Draw 200 random bits. Count the ones. Log the score. Repeat, day and night, year after year. It's stream uploaded to a central archive at Princeton, where anyone can download it. No sensors, no microphones, no cameras, no feed of the news. The boxes cannot know what day it is. That's what made the project's claim so stark. If these blind, deaf boxes deviate together during human events, something with no name in physics is happening. A machine that cannot read the news, reacting to the news. Nelson had a name for it anyway, an old one. Decades before the internet, the French thinker Pierre Teilhard de Chardin had imagined that humanity was slowly growing a shared layer of mind around the planet, a thinking envelope over the biosphere, which he called the noosphere. For Teilhard, it was philosophy, almost poetry. Nelson proposed, in effect, to put electrodes on it. He spoke of the network as a kind of planetary EEG, dozens of quiet sensors, listening for the moments when the world's scattered attention fuses into one attention, the way a brain's scattered neurons fuse into one thought. Then came September 11th, 2001. The Global Consciousness Project's analysis of that day became the most famous graph in this entire field. According to the project, as the attacks unfolded and billions of minds converged in shock and grief on a single point in space, the network's statistics deviated, the device's outputs correlating with each other beyond what chance should allow, the anomaly building through the day of maximum horror and settling back over the days that followed. And the project reported something even more unsettling in the same data. The drift away from randomness appeared to begin hours before the first plane hit. And of all the project's reported patterns, the one I find most haunting as an image is the quietest, New Year's Eve. Midnight doesn't happen to the world all at once. It sweeps across it, time zone by time zone, a moving wave of countdowns and embraces, and held breath circling the planet for 24 hours. The project reported that its network statistics rippled in step with that wave. Small deviations tracking midnight as midnight travelled west, as if the boxes could feel each successive crowd in each successive country, counting down to the same shared second. Blind boxes, remember. No clocks are fed to the analysis but the world's own. If you want to feel the full seduction of the first story, hold that picture for a moment. The human wave of New Year joy rolling around a dark planet and a lattice of little machines seeming to shiver as it passes. They kept watching after that. Great disasters, global vigils, moments of shared celebration and shared mourning. Over decades and hundreds of pre-specified events, the project reported a cumulative pattern whose odds against chance they calculated in the trillions to one, and reported that the network stirred most not for the events that were objectively biggest, but for the ones that were felt most. The moments of shared grief, shared joy, shared held breath. On the Believer's reading, the machines were not measuring news, they were measuring coherence, millions of separate minds becoming, briefly, one mind. A planetary version of the bonded couple in the Princeton basement. Now the first story has momentum. Machines responding to intention, networks responding to collective emotion, which leaves one more wall for it to climb, the strangest one, time. But could a serious scientist ever get the future to show up in a controlled experiment, on demand, in a lab? In 2011, one of the most respected journals in psychology published a paper that nearly broke the field in half. The author was Daryl Bem, not an outsider, but a distinguished Cornell professor, a respected experimental psychologist with decades of mainstream work behind him. The paper was called Feeling the Future. It reported 9 experiments, run over 8 years, on more than 1,000 ordinary participants, and its claim, stated in the driest possible academic prose, was that effects can precede their causes in the human mind. One experiment was elegantly simple. A participant faces a screen showing 2 curtains. Behind one is a picture, behind the other, a blank wall. Pick the curtain with the picture. Here's the twist that makes it impossible. At the moment the participant chooses, there is no picture. The computer selects the image, and which curtain hides it, randomly, after the choice is locked in. There is nothing to detect, nothing to read, no signal to pick up, because the answer does not exist yet. Pure chance, says 50%. Bem's participants scored 53.1%. 3 points. It doesn't sound like much. But 3 points, over 1,000 people, in an experiment where the target didn't exist yet, is either noise or it's the future leaving fingerprints on the present. But only, and this detail should raise the hair on your arms, for one category of image. When the future picture was emotionally charged, arousing, the hit rate rose above chance. When it was a neutral photograph, performance sat at exactly 50%, as if the pull came not from information, but from feeling, as if emotional significance, and only emotional significance, could reach backward through time. Another of the 9 experiments inverted memory itself. Participants studied a list of words, then took a surprise recall test. Afterward, the computer randomly chose half the words and had them practice those. Bem reported that participants had recalled the practiced words better on the test they had already taken, that studying a word on Tuesday improved your memory of it on Monday. A third design from the 9 is worth seeing. because it's the most disquieting of all. Psychology has a workhorse effect called habituation. Flash someone a disturbing image repeatedly, and its punch fades. The 10th viewing unsettles less than the first. Familiarity sands the edges off. Bem ran it in reverse. Participants were shown pairs of images and asked which they preferred. Only afterward did the computer randomly pick one image from each pair and flash it at them over and over, the habituation treatment administered after the choice. Bem reported that, for disturbing images, participants had already preferred the image they were later going to be habituated to, as if the future repetitions had pre-softened it, taken the sting out of a picture in advance. Time reversed emotional sanding, and credit where it's due, because it matters for what comes later. Bem did not behave like a man with something to hide. He published his methods in full, packaged his experiment software, and handed it to any lab that asked, actively inviting the world to try to reproduce him. Remember that invitation. The world accepted it. Notice the fingerprint, because you've now seen it 3 times. In the Princeton basement, the effect was amplified by emotional bonds. In the global network, the machines reportedly stirred for shared feeling, not for raw magnitude. And in Bem's experiments, the future reached the present only when it carried emotional charge. The first stories theorist put it plainly. Whatever this connection is, it doesn't run on information. It runs on meaning, which is precisely, word for word, what Jung said synchronicity was, connection by meaning, and precisely why your strange moments involve the people you love and not your electricity bill. If you're still with me this deep into the night, following the story wherever it actually leads is the whole spirit of this channel, and if that's your kind of night, the subscribe button is just below. The story is a long way from over, because there's one more laboratory to visit, and this one studied the exact phenomenon in our title. Not intention, not machines, dreams. In the 1960s and 70s, in a red brick hospital in Brooklyn called the Maimonides Medical Center, there was a room where people were paid to sleep. Not to be studied while they happened to sleep. Paid to sleep, on purpose, as the job. And what the researchers were hunting for in that room was whether a dream could be planted from the outside. The sleeper, the receiver, went to bed wired to an EEG machine, electrodes, reading their brainwaves, while researchers watched for the telltale signature of REM sleep, the stage where the eyes dart beneath closed lids and the night's most vivid dreams unfold. In a separate, sealed room, sometimes in another part of the building entirely, sat a second person, the sender. At the start of the night, the sender opened a sealed envelope, chosen at random from a pool containing a single art print, a famous painting. Their only job, all night, look at the image, concentrate on it, and try, however you try to do such a thing, to send it into the sleeper's dreams. Each time the EEG showed the sleeper deep in REM, the researchers let the dream run, then woke them by intercom. Tell us what you were dreaming. Everything was recorded. In the morning, the transcripts of the night's dreams went to independent judges, blind to everything, who compared them against the full pool of possible images. Which painting, if any, do these dreams match? Across more than a decade, the Maimonides team, the psychiatrist Montague Ullman, and the psychologist Stanley Krippner reported that the judges matched dreams to the target image at rates above chance across a series of studies. And what carried the claim into legend wasn't the statistics, it was the transcripts. Nights when the target was Chagall's painting of a wedding, and the sleeper dreamed of ceremonies, of a woman in white, of crowds and music, a boxing match target, and dreams of Madison Square Garden. Read the best hits cold, side by side with the paintings. And something in you drops. The correspondences feel less like statistics and more like leakage. Like two minds sharing one night. Which is the claim, isn't it? That's our title. This was the laboratory version of the thing that has happened at your own breakfast table. 2 people, 2 rooms, 1 dream. And in 1971, the Maimonides team staged the most theatrical experiment in the history of sleep science, one that ties every thread of the first story into a single night. They didn't use one sender, they used 2,000. The Grateful Dead were playing a run of concerts in Port Chester, New York, about 45 miles from the Brooklyn Dream Lab. The band agreed to turn their audience into the experiment. At the peak of the show, a message went up on the projection screens telling the crowd, in effect, you are about to take part in an ESP dream study. Try to send this picture. Then a randomly selected art image was projected, and 2,000 concertgoers, focused, emotional, utterly absorbed in a shared experience, stared at it together, while miles away in Brooklyn, a man named Malcolm Besant slept wired to the EEG, with no way of knowing what image had been chosen. On the reported nights of the experiment, the judges' ratings linked Besant's dreams to the target images at rates the team scored as hits. One collective mind, the believers said, whispering into one sleeping brain, the bonded pair effect, and the global network effect, and the dream-telepathy effect, all on one stage, with a soundtrack. And Malcolm Besant, the sleeper on the receiving end of that concert, was at the centre of the Maimonides team's boldest series of all, the one that fuses this room with Bem's. On some nights, there was no sender at all, nothing to receive, because nothing had been chosen. Besant slept, dreamed, reported his dreams at each waking, and only the next morning did a random procedure select a target experience, which the staff then built for him. An image, plus sounds, props, an immersive little scene he was walked through after breakfast. The question, had his dreams, the night before, described the experience that randomness hadn't yet picked? Across 2 reported series, the judges' ratings said yes. At rates the team scored well above chance, dreams, on their reading, reaching not across space but across the night, into a morning that didn't exist yet. Dream telepathy and felt the future, fused in one sleeping man in Brooklyn 4 decades before Bem. I'll say it again before we move on. Every result in this section has a second chapter, and we're getting to it. But you can feel why the first story owns this topic on this platform. It has everything. Nobel laureates, impossible Beatles, a haunted number, machines that flinch at grief, and a rock concert beamed into a stranger's dream. So step back and look at what the first story has built, because told this way, and I've told it at full strength on purpose, it's formidable. At the foundation, physics itself, proving beyond appeal that reality contains connections without mechanism, correlations that ignore distance, entanglement woven into the world's basement, certified by Nobel committees. 1 floor up, Pauli, a founder of that physics, spending 25 years arguing that mind and matter may be 2 faces of one deeper order, and that Jung's impossible coincidences are that order breaking the surface. Then the laboratories, one after another, reporting the same fingerprint. Machines drifting with human intention, regardless of distance and even of time. A planetary network stirring when millions of minds feel as one. Ordinary people, faintly touched by futures that don't yet exist. Sleepers dreaming. Above chance, the images a stranger stares at in another room. And running through every floor of the building, the same watermark. The effects track emotion, bonds, meaning. The connection is strongest exactly where love is. On this story, the answer to our question writes itself. Why do you and the people closest to you dream the same things? Because separation was always the illusion. Because the two of you are not two sealed boxes trading signals through the air, but two openings of one deeper thing, and at night, when the day's noise dies down, the partition between you thins, and what one of you carries spills into the other. The dream you shared wasn't transmitted, it was never in one head to begin with. And the first story even has a physicist blueprint for how it could all hang together, because I'd be selling it short if I didn't give you its best theoretical mind. David Bohm was no fringe figure, a protege of Oppenheimer, a colleague Einstein admired, and the author of one of the serious minority interpretations of quantum mechanics, mathematically rigorous, never mainstream, never refuted. Late in his life, Bohm proposed that the world we see, separate objects, separate places, separate people, is only the unfolded surface of reality. Beneath it, he argued, lies what he called the implicate order, a deeper level where everything is enfolded into everything else, the way every fragment of a hologram contains the whole image. On Bohm's picture, two entangled particles aren't sending each other anything. They look connected on the surface because underneath they were never two, and you can hear how the first story wants to finish that sentence. Neither were the two of you. The dream you shared wasn't transmitted, it surfaced in two places at once, from a level where your two minds are folds of one fabric. I want to be precise about the status of this. The implicate order is a real proposal by a serious physicist, and it is an interpretation, a way of picturing the equations, not a demonstrated fact, and it makes no promise that minds, as opposed to particles, participate in any of it. But it's the most respectable roof anyone has ever offered this building. Believers rarely cite it precisely. They should. It's the best they have. That is a beautiful story. It is told, in some form, in 1,000 videos on this platform, and most of them stop right here. Soaring music. The universe is a web. Good night. This channel doesn't stop here. You know that about me by now. Because every claim in that story is a claim about measurement, and claims about measurement can be checked. In the years after those headlines, people did check. Other laboratories, larger studies, sharper statistics, including, to their great credit, some of the original researchers themselves. That record exists, and almost none of the videos telling the first story will show it to you. I will. Some of what happened when the checking began is uncomfortable. One of these celebrated results triggered the deepest crisis in the modern history of psychology. Not because it was trivial, but because it was so carefully done that if it was wrong, a whole way of doing science was wrong with it. And behind all of it waits the physics. Because the first story's foundation stone, entangled particles, therefore entangled minds, rests on an assumption so natural you probably didn't notice yourself making it, that if two things are quantum connected, one can carry news of the other. It turns out quantum mechanics has something to say about that assumption. Not a hunch, a theorem, a hard result proven inside the same mathematics that gave us entanglement in the first place. What that theorem says will close one of tonight's two doors, permanently. And what's waiting behind the other door? The true answer to why you and the people you love dream the same things is not a consolation prize. It involves your heartbeat and theirs, and something laboratories have measured, passing between two people who simply sit near each other, that I promise you have never heard explained. Take a breath. Settle deeper into the pillow. The cross-examination begins now. Every version of the first story, the elegant ones and the crude ones alike, rests its full weight on one single load-bearing beam. It goes like this. Quantum physics proved that two particles can be connected across any distance. Therefore, two minds can be connected across any distance. Entangled particles, entangled people. The word doing all the work in that sentence is therefore. So before we touch a single experiment, let's inspect the beam. What kind of connection did physics actually prove? Come back to the two entangled particles, one in your hand, one on the far side of the galaxy. You measure yours, you get a result. And at that instant, the theory says, the other particle's result is fixed to match. No signal crossed the gap. No time passed. That part is real. That part won the Nobel Prize. Now ask the question that matters for our topic. You, holding your particle, can you use this? Can your distant friend, by doing something to their particle, make anything about yours change in a way you could notice? Can they send you a warning, a feeling, a dream? Quantum mechanics answers this question. Not with an opinion, with a theorem. It's called the no signaling theorem, and it is proven inside the same mathematics that gives us entanglement in the first place. You can't accept entanglement and reject this. They come from the same equations, the way the two sides of a coin come from the same metal. And what it says, in plain words, is this: no measurement, no manipulation, no cleverness performed on one entangled particle can produce any detectable change, any at all, at the other one. Let me show you what that means from the inside, because the inside view is everything. Suppose your friend across the galaxy measures their particle. Right now, what do you see on your side? Here's the entire answer. Nothing. Your particle behaves exactly as it did before. You measure it, and you get what you always get from a quantum particle, a random result. Random before they measured, random after. Random if they measured, random if they didn't. Random if they smashed their particle with a hammer. From where you stand, the stream of results coming out of your particle is indistinguishable from noise, forever, no matter what anyone does anywhere else in the universe. Scream at it. Measure it 1,000,000 times. Move the mountain. Your screen shows the same static either way. Nothing arrives. Ever. Then where is the famous connection? It's real, but look carefully at where it lives. It shows up only when the two of you get back together and compare notes. You read out your list of random results. They read out theirs, and the lists match, impossibly, beautifully, in exactly the pattern quantum mechanics predicts, and no ordinary story can explain. The correlation is there, but you could only see it by bringing the two lists to the same place, and the lists travel by ordinary means: a radio wave, a letter, a person on a train, at or below the speed of light, through plain old cause and effect. So, entanglement gives you correlation you can verify later, and communication never. The universe, it turns out, drew the line with surgical precision, and the line runs exactly through the middle of our topic. Because think about what every synchronicity story actually requires. The mother who wakes at 3 a.m. needs to receive something, an alarm, arriving now, usable now. The dreamer needs the image delivered into tonight's dream, not verified at some future breakfast. Every one of those moments is a message, and a message is precisely, provably, the one thing entanglement cannot carry. There's a name in physics for what would happen if it could: signaling, and signaling with entanglement would break the universe as we know it. It would let influence outrun light, which relativity forbids on pain of unraveling cause and effect itself. This is why physicists were able to prove the theorem so cleanly. Quantum mechanics and relativity have coexisted for a century, tested to absurd precision, and they can only coexist because entanglement is exactly this: strange and no stranger, connected but silent, correlated but mute. And notice, this should feel familiar. You've already met a law like this tonight. Pauli's own exclusion principle, a rule with no force behind it, a constraint with no mechanism, correlation written into the world's foundation. Pauli was right that nature contains a causal connection. His own discovery is one. But the exclusion principle doesn't send messages either. No one has ever received a warning through it. It seems to be a deep policy of this universe, enforced everywhere we've looked. Correlation without mechanism is permitted. Communication without mechanism is not. And if the theorem feels too abstract, here's the flesh and blood proof that physicists believe it. They've built an industry on it. You may have heard that quantum teleportation is real, and it is. Laboratories have teleported quantum states between chips, across cities, even between the ground and a satellite. Surely that settles it. Surely teleportation means quantum links carry things? Look at how the protocol actually works, because it's the theorem wearing overalls. To teleport a quantum state from her lab to his, the two labs share entangled particles, and then, at the crucial step, her lab must pick up the phone. A measurement result, a few plain classical bits, has to travel from her to him by ordinary means. Radio, fiber, light, at or below light speed, or the teleportation simply does not happen. His half of the entangled pair sits there, useless, containing nothing readable, until the ordinary message arrives. The most futuristic procedure in all of physics comes with a mandatory phone call, because without one, entanglement transmits exactly what the theorem says it transmits. Nothing. Engineers who stake billion-dollar quantum networks on these rules do not budget for exceptions. There are none. There are two more quantum facts standing behind the theorem, and I'll give them to you in a sentence each. First, entanglement is jealous. The tighter two particles are entangled with each other, the less either can be entangled with anything else. Maximal entanglement admits no third party. A brain worm wired into meaningful entanglement with one specific other brain. Out of 8 billion, through years of shared life, the mathematics doesn't just fail to support that picture, it forbids it. And second, even the fragile entanglement that particles do carry dies almost instantly in a warm, wet environment. The process is called decoherence. It happens in fractions of a fraction of a second, and I've taken it apart properly in the consciousness video, so here it earns only its one line. A living brain is close to the worst place in the universe for quantum delicacy to survive. So here is the second story's opening statement, and it's brutal in its simplicity. The first story said, "Physics proved connection without mechanism, therefore minds can touch at a distance." The correction is, physics proved connection without mechanism and proved, in the same breath, that no message can ride it. The beam wasn't weak, the beam was never there. But wait, I can hear the objection, because it's a fair one. Fine. The theory says minds can't signal. But what about the data? Theories have been wrong before. That's the whole history of science. Princeton ran for 28 years. The global network flinched on September 11th. Bem's participants felt the future. The dreamers dreamed the paintings. If the measurements are real, then the theorem has an exception, and the exception is us. And honestly, that would be the greatest discovery in the history of science. Exactly right. So now we do what the first stories tell us never do. We check what happened when other people ran the experiments. And before we re-enter the basement, you should know something that the first stories tell us never mention. This exact movie has played before, start to finish, one generation earlier. Watching the rerun will teach you the plot. In the 1930s, at Duke University, a botanist turned psychologist named Joseph Banks Rhine set out to drag telepathy into the laboratory, and for a while he owned American science's imagination the way PEAR would later own Princeton's basement. His instrument was a deck of 25 cards you've seen, even if you don't know their name. Zener cards, circle, cross, wavy lines, square, star, 5 of each. A sender looks at a card, a receiver, screened away, names the symbol. Chance says, 1 hit in 5. And Rhine's early star subjects seem to shatter that. One famous young man produced runs so far above chance that the odds against them ran to astronomical figures, including, on one legendary occasion with heightened stakes, a reported perfect run. 25 cards, 25 hits. Rhine published a book, coined the term ESP, and made headlines worldwide. It was the PEAR story, the Bem story, 60 years early. A credentialed insider, a simple protocol, statistics that seemed unanswerable. Then the checking began, and watch how precisely history rhymes. Critics visiting the lab found the early conditions leakier than the write-up suggested. Cards faintly readable from the back under some lighting, senders and receivers within subtle earshot, scoring and shuffling procedures with soft edges, and the star subjects free to stop and rest when the magic was not flowing, a freedom that silently filters out the bad runs. As Rhine tightened each screw, opaque screens, distant rooms, machine shuffling, of fixed-length runs, the scores of his stars sagged toward 1 in 5. The most famous subject's powers faded and never returned. The field even coined a term for this pattern, the decline effect, and debated it earnestly, as if evaporation under scrutiny were a property of the phenomenon rather than of the loopholes. And when other universities ran the tightened protocol fresh, the celebrated effect mostly declined to appear at all. Within a couple of decades, the astonishment had drained out of the Zener deck entirely, leaving behind a pattern, not a power. So as we walk back through Part 1's laboratories now, keep the Rhine rerun beside you like a program guide. Act 1. A rigorous insider reports the impossible with impressive statistics. Act 2. The effect is strangely shy, strongest with certain special subjects, in home conditions, under flexible procedures. Act 3. The controls tighten. The outside labs arrive, and the effect thins toward nothing, while believers hear in that very thinning something mysterious. You are about to watch this play performed 3 more times, with better costumes. Start with PEAR, because PEAR was the strongest fortress, and because the Princeton team did something that deserves respect. They invited the test. In the late 1990s, the PEAR lab joined forces with 2 independent German laboratories, in Freiburg and in Gießen, to run the definitive version of their own experiment. Same machines, same protocol, agreed in advance, same intention task, 3 labs, hundreds of thousands of trials, everything specified before the data came in, precisely so that no one could adjust the target after the arrow landed. If the Princeton effect was a fact of nature, 3 labs would now see it. The results were published in the year 2000. The pre-specified primary effect, the one PEAR had reported for 2 decades, did not appear. Not at Princeton's partner labs, and not even, in that pre-registered run at the size the original database had promised. The consortium's own report said it plainly. The primary result failed to replicate. The authors, still committed to the search, pointed to various secondary wrinkles in the data, but wrinkles found after the fact are exactly what the pre-registration existed to rule out. By the standard the experiment itself had set in advance, the answer came back: nothing here. And once that door was open, older questions about the original mountain of data got harder to wave away. Independent reviewers who went through the PEAR database noticed that the celebrated deviation wasn't spread evenly across those hundreds of volunteers. A very large share of it traced to a tiny number of prolific operators, with one individual listed in the records as Operator 10, accounting for a wildly outsized slice of the entire 28-year effect. Remove a couple of people, and the mountain shrank toward a molehill. Was Operator 10 a uniquely gifted mind? Or was Operator 10 a member of the lab staff, generating enormous volumes of trials under looser real-world conditions than the tidy summary suggests? The published record doesn't settle it, and an effect that lives or dies on one anonymous individual is not the same claim as human intention moves machines. What about the bonded couples? The result I most wanted to be true. It was always a small sub-analysis inside the larger database, one slice among many that the team examined. And here's the uncomfortable arithmetic of slicing. Examine enough subgroups of any noisy data, pairs versus singles, men versus women, near versus far, this machine versus that one, and some slice will light up by chance alone, and it will always feel meaningful, because you only remember the slice that glowed. Without an independent, pre-declared replication of that specific finding, and there is none at that standard, the 6 times love effect remains a beautiful anecdote wearing the clothing of a result. PEAR closed its doors in 2007. Jung, to his credit, never overclaimed in the fortress-building way his fans did. He said the lab had done what it set out to do, and the archive was there for the future. The archive is there. What it contains, on the sternest reading the data allows, is 28 years of a whisper that vanished when 3 labs listened for it together. The Global Consciousness Project's data has a different vulnerability, and seeing it will upgrade your defenses against every impressive graph you'll ever meet on this platform. Ask the practical questions a working scientist asks. When the towers fell, what exactly was the network supposed to show? A rise in this statistic, or that one, averaged over which devices? Starting when, at the first impact, at the first news broadcast 4 hours before, ending, when that evening, midnight, 3 days later, none of those choices is dishonest. But every one of them is a fork in the road, and a September 11th analysis requires dozens of such forks. Statisticians call this the garden of forking paths, and here is its cruel property. If you walk the garden freely, with the event already known, some path through the choices will almost always arrive at an impressive-looking anomaly, carved out of pure noise by the choosing itself. Torture the data long enough, and it confesses to anything. Independent analysts who re-examined the famous September 11th result reported exactly this signature. Pick the windows and statistics one way, the anomaly is there. Pick them another equally reasonable way, it thins toward nothing. The eerie detail about the network stirring hours before the first plane, the one that gives everyone chills, lives only along some of those paths, not all of them. That is not what a robust physical effect looks like. A real signal, a pulsar, a particle, a planet, gets stronger the more honestly you interrogate it. This one gets weaker. The project, to be fair, learned and adapted, For later events, it moved to registering predictions in advance, and the cumulative trillions to one headline number is built from that long series. But critics who examine the series note that the crucial flexibilities never fully closed: which world events qualify, what counts as the event's beginning, which formula is consulted, and that the reported effect, spread across hundreds of events, remains a statistical mist, never once visible in any single device, on any single day, only ever summoned by aggregation. After more than 2 decades, no mainstream physics laboratory has adopted, confirmed, or extended the finding. The machines, as far as physics can tell, never flinched. We did, and we drew our grief on top of their noise. And then there's Bem, because what happened after feeling the future is one of the most important scientific stories of this century, and almost nobody outside science knows it. Understand what made Bem's paper so dangerous. It wasn't sloppy, that was the terrifying part. Bem was a respected insider, and he built his 9 experiments using the field's own standard methods, its standard statistics, its standard thresholds of proof, and those standards said the future influences the past. The journal that published it did something almost unheard of. Alongside the paper, it ran a rebuttal in the same issue, in which a team of methodologists argued that the problem wasn't Bem. The problem was that the rulebook itself could be gamed, not by fraud, but by ordinary, invisible flexibility. Test a few outcomes. Trim here, stop collecting data when the numbers look good, report the version that worked. Every field did it, mostly innocently. Bem's paper simply pushed the rulebook to a conclusion so impossible that everyone finally looked down and checked what the rules could prove. Answer: anything. Then came the replications, and this time they were pre-registered. The forks in the garden closed in advance. A team of skeptics reran the retroactive memory experiment across multiple labs. A larger consortium reran it with thousands of participants, more than triple Bem's original numbers. Nothing. The 53.1% went back to 50. The future stopped arriving. Supporters point, even now, to a later meta-analysis pooling 90 experiments and reporting a small overall effect. And skeptics reply that pooling a literature is only as good as the literature, and a literature built before the reforms is exactly the kind that publication bias and flexible analysis inflate. But the deepest verdict isn't in the tallies. It's in what the field did next. Bem's paper detonated what's now called the replication crisis, the discovery that a disturbing fraction of published psychology, far beyond anything paranormal, would not replicate under strict conditions. And out of that wreckage came the reforms that define good science today: registering your predictions before the data, publishing null results, multi-lab replication as the price of a big claim. It is one of history's finer ironies. A paper about feeling the future actually did change the future, not by proving precognition, but by forcing science to fix the machinery that had certified it. And the dream laboratory? Same pattern, gentler ending. When researchers outside Maimonides attempted the dream-telepathy protocol under tightened conditions, the results came back inconsistent. Some small positives, many nulls, nothing that settled into a repeatable effect. The original studies, reviewers noted, leaned on judging tasks with soft edges. Dreams are rich, paintings are rich, and a motivated human judge can find wedding imagery in almost any night's dreaming. The Grateful Dead night made a glorious story and a porous experiment. 2,000 distracted senders, one long-shot sleeper, and scoring loose enough to be generous. As with everything else in this chapter, the experience of the researchers was real. The transcripts still raise the hair on your arms, and the effect, asked to stand still and repeat itself, would not. So let's be exact about where the cross-examination leaves us, because this channel doesn't do sneering, and the truth here has real texture. What survives? The experiences. Fully, the shared dreams happen. The 3 a.m. wakings happen. The impossible timings happen. Constantly. To sane and honest people. The Victorian census takers were right about that. And nothing tonight subtracts a single one of your own moments. What also survives is the deep physics fact Pauli built his hopes on. The universe really does contain correlation without mechanism at its very foundation. That remains one of the strangest truths we know. What does not survive? Every claim of transfer. The theorem forbids the channel. Entanglement carries no messages, guards its bonds jealously, and dies in warm matter. And the laboratories, once other laboratories checked them, could not hold the ground. The basement effect that vanished under 3-lab scrutiny, the global network's mist of forking paths, the future that stopped arriving the moment the predictions were registered in advance, the dreams that wouldn't repeat, 50 years of searching, and the honest total is no reproducible evidence that one mind reaches another without a physical path. If that ever changes, and real scientists remain open, because a reproducible result here would be the discovery of the century. It will change through exactly the pre-registered, multi-lab fire that the first story's results could not walk through, and give the searchers their real legacy, because it's larger than most people know. Some scientists have called parapsychology the control group for science itself, the field that shows what happens when honest, credentialed people apply the standard machinery of research to an effect that isn't there. Every flaw it surfaced, flexible analysis, star subjects, publication bias, the decline of effects under tightening controls, turned out to infect ordinary science too, just less visibly, because in ordinary science, the conclusions were plausible enough that nobody checked. Rhine's leaky screens taught experimental design. Pear's operator concentration taught data auditing. Bem detonated the reforms an entire discipline now runs on. A century of hunting for the mind's hidden channel found no channel, and, in the process, rebuilt the instruments every other hunt now depends on. The searchers failed at the thing they wanted and succeeded at something science needed. That is a strange kind of honour, but it is honour, which leaves us standing in front of the real mystery. And don't mistake this next part for a shrug, because it's the summit of the night. The experiences are real, the transfer isn't. Then something else, something present in your actual bedroom, your actual marriage, your actual grief, is generating all of it. The matching dreams, the timed phone calls, the certainty at 3 a.m. Something powerful enough to produce, over and over, moments so precise they've convinced humanity for its entire history that minds must touch. They do touch. That's the twist. Just not the way the first story imagined, and once you see the real mechanism, measured in real laboratories, with results that do replicate, I think you'll find it does something telepathy never could. It starts with an experiment where 2 people simply sit near each other, doing nothing at all, while the instruments record their hearts falling into step. Before we get to the hearts falling into step, and we're getting there, I owe you the humbling half first, because I promised you 2 halves, and this one costs a small illusion. I'll try to take it gently, and I'll give you something back for it. come back to the mother who wakes at 3 a.m. certain something is wrong with her son. The phone rings. Something is wrong. The story is true. Versions of it fill the Victorian archives and your own family's history. Now let me ask the question that the story never invites. The question I had to force myself to ask the first time. How many mothers woke up worried that night? Not in the story, in the world. Hold that question, because it's the one that unlocks everything. Think of every parent of a grown child, every person with someone precious far away on one ordinary night. Worry is what love does at 3 a.m. It's practically the job description. Across a single country, on a single night, thousands upon thousands of people surface from sleep with a knot of dread about someone specific. And on almost every one of those nights, for almost every one of those people, nothing is wrong. They check the phone. Silence. They fall back asleep. And here is the crucial part, the part your memory was built to do. By morning, that night is gone, unfiled. There was no event to attach it to, so it never becomes a story, never gets told at a breakfast table, never gets written to the Victorian census. The miss leaves no trace. But run the numbers forward. Thousands of worried wakings, night after night, year after year, and out in the world, bad news is always happening to someone. Eventually, by arithmetic alone, some waking lands on the same night as the phone call, and that night is unforgettable. That night becomes the story. Told for 50 years, verified, time-stamped, true in every detail. The experience is completely honest. The teller is completely honest. What's invisible is the denominator, the 10,000 identical wakings that hit nothing. Your memory, in other words, is not a recording device. It's a curator with a flair for drama, and this is not a flaw. It's the design. A brain that filed every non-event would drown. So evolution built you a machine that keeps the hits, discards the misses, and splices meaning into whatever survives. We took this machine apart properly in the consciousness video. The brain as a constructor of experience, rather than a camera, so tonight it gets just this one scene. But watch what the machine does to coincidence. It doesn't merely remember the hit. It erases the entire field of misses the hit was standing in, and then presents the hit to you, alone on an empty stage, lit like a miracle. That's the con. And knowing about it doesn't make you immune, it runs on me too. Knowing is just the start of honest accounting. The Victorian census takers, careful as they were, could count the stories people brought them. Nobody can count the nights that never became stories. 17,000 interviews about the numerator and the denominator lost forever. And there is one true story that holds this entire accounting in a single heartbreaking frame. The strongest case the first story ever had, and the place where the denominator becomes visible to the naked eye. In October 1966, in the Welsh mining village of Aberfan, a mountain of coal waste above the town collapsed after heavy rain and came down on the local school. 144 people died, most of them children. In the shattered days afterward, a psychiatrist named John Barker went to the village and began hearing, over and over, the same impossible kind of story. People who said they had seen it coming. He put out a public appeal and collected the accounts, dozens of them, of dreams and forebodings in the days before the disaster. And one of them will never leave you. A 10-year-old girl who died at the school had told her mother the morning before about a dream. She had dreamed she went to school and the school wasn't there. Something black had come down all over it. Her mother remembered the words exactly. The girl was buried with her classmates. I'm not going to explain that story away in a sentence, and I'm not going to pretend it doesn't land. Barker couldn't let it go either, and what he did next is the perfect experiment for tonight, because it takes premonition out of hindsight and puts it on the clock. He reasoned, if disasters really cast shadows backward into dreams, then don't collect the dreams afterward, collect them before. In 1967, he helped found the British Premonitions Bureau, a standing public registry where anyone could send in a premonition the moment they had it, date-stamped, filed, and then checked against the future as the future arrived. Thousands of premonitions came in over the years that followed, and now every question we've learned to ask tonight gets its answer in one place. With the dreams logged in advance, no curator, no hindsight. The full denominator, finally on the books. How did precognition perform? The Bureau's files filled with predicted disasters that never happened, and the disasters that did happen arrived overwhelmingly unannounced. A tiny handful of near misses kept hope alive. The Bureau came to lean on two-star recipients, whose hits seemed uncanny, and no forecast ever proved reliable enough to warn anyone of anything. The project faded within a few years. Filed in advance, the future turned out to be exactly as dark as it has always been. So what about the girl? Hold both truths, because both are real. Children who live in the shadow of a looming black tip, one that adults in that valley had worried about aloud for years, have that shadow in their days, and the day's residue writes the dreams. And across a nation of millions of dreaming children, dreams of school and darkness, and things falling happen every single night, unrecorded, until the one unbearable morning when one of them comes true and becomes the only one history keeps. That doesn't make her dream less true or less devastating. It makes it what it was, a real dream from a real child in a world so large that even our nightmares sometimes find their morning. So the first thing actually connecting you to your loved ones in these moments is this. They are what you think about all day, every day, a running background hum. Of the 1,000 stray thoughts you had today, how many touched the people you love? Dozens? Hundreds? Now, when the phone lights up with her name, which thought gets promoted to a story? Not the 400 times you thought of her and nothing happened. The one time the timing kissed. You think of her constantly, so when she calls, a thought of her is usually nearby to claim the credit. And that would be a slightly deflating place to stop if the numbers ended there. They don't. Because the honest mathematics of coincidence isn't deflating at all. It's astonishment. I want to teach you the single most counterintuitive fact in all of probability, and I want to do it with a party. Put 23 people in a room, just 23, a small classroom. What are the odds that 2 of them share a birthday? Your gut checks the arithmetic. 365 days, 23 people, surely tiny, a few percent, maybe. The true answer is better than 50-50. 23 people, and a shared birthday is more likely than not. Read that twice, because your gut is still arguing with it. Push the room to 50 people, and the probability climbs past 97%, near certainty, from 50 strangers and a calendar. Why does your gut get this so wrong? Because your gut computes the wrong question. It asks, what are the odds someone shares my birthday? One person, one target, truly unlikely. But that's not what the room is doing. The room is checking every pair, and 23 people contain 253 pairs, each one a fresh lottery ticket. Your intuition sees 23 chances. Reality holds 253. Coincidence doesn't scale with the number of people. It scales with the number of pairs. And pairs explode. Hold that, and now widen the lens. Statisticians have a name for what happens when this pairing arithmetic meets a big world. The law of truly large numbers. It says roughly, with a large enough number of opportunities, any outrageous thing is practically guaranteed to happen to someone, somewhere, regularly. A 1 in a million event sounds like it should almost never occur. But there are over 8 billion people, each living a day of thousands of small events. On that arithmetic, 1 in a million events must happen, by the tens of thousands, every single day. And each one lands on a real person who is fully entitled to whisper, "What are the odds?" The odds were excellent, just not for you in particular, for someone, and someone is who it always happens to. A great mathematician once put a wry number on it. Littlewood, of Cambridge, estimated that an alert person encounters events at a rate that guarantees roughly 1 certified 1,000,000 to 1 miracle per month, per person, as a matter of bookkeeping. A miracle a month, not as a gift from beyond, but as your statistical ration. Notice what this does to Camara's law of seriality. The waves of coincidence he tallied on park benches. He was right that clusters come. Randomness really does clump. True chance is streakier than our smoothed-out expectations. Which is why shuffled songs seem to repeat artists, and why lightning does strike twice. What he got wrong was the need for a new force. The waves were real. The ocean was just mathematics. A true case shows the law at work on the grandest scale. In the mid-1980s, a woman in New Jersey won the state lottery jackpot, and then, a few months later, won it again. Newspapers ran the figure everyone wanted. The odds of that, they declared, were about 1 in 17 trillion, and for her, buying those 2 particular tickets, that's roughly right. But 2 statisticians reran the question the honest way, not what were the odds of this woman winning twice, but what are the odds that someone, somewhere, among the millions of people playing lotteries year after year, wins 2 jackpots within a few months? Their answer, better than even over a handful of years. Practically inevitable over a couple of decades. The 17 trillion miracle and the near certainty are the same event. The only thing that changed was remembering how many tickets the world is holding. Every synchronicity you will ever hear works this arithmetic on you. The story hands you 1 woman, 2 tickets, and vertigo, and hides the planet full of players. Now aim all of this at tonight's title. 2 people sharing a dream. What are the honest odds? Every human sleeper cycles through several dream periods a night. Call it a handful of dreams each. Most instantly forgotten. 8 billion people. Tens of billions of dreams per night, drawn, and this matters not from infinite possibilities, but from the same small human deck. Falling, water, being chased, teeth, a childhood house, a familiar face in the wrong place, being lost, being late. Deal tens of billions of hands nightly from 1 small deck, and pairs of matching hands are not a mystery to explain. They're a certainty to expect. The mystery would be a night without them. And of all the pairs of people in the world, which pairs actually compare notes at breakfast? Only the ones who share a table. The matches between strangers in different cities happen constantly and dissolve unwitnessed because those 2 will never speak. You only ever audit the dreams of the people close enough to tell. The net is only ever hung where the fish already are. So there's the second thing connecting you. You are the only pair that checks. But now, I get to keep the promise. Because if the story ended at arithmetic plus memory, It would explain shared dreams the way it explains lottery winners. Somebody had to. And that is not the whole truth about you and the people you love. You are not two random dreamers from the 8 billion. When the two of you match, the deck itself was stacked by something real, physical, and measured. This is the half that gives more than it takes. Here is where the instruments come in. Sometime in the past few years, in more than one laboratory, an experiment like this was run. Two people who love each other are seated near one another. Sensors on both, heart rhythm, breathing, sometimes electrodes reading the surface tempo of the brain. They're given nothing to do. No task, no touching, no talking. Just be near each other while the instruments listen. And the instruments record the two bodies drifting into step. Heart rhythms edging toward one another, breathing settling into a shared cadence. Two separate people, given nothing to do, and their hearts start keeping time. Not as poetry, on the readout. In studies of couples, researchers report that the two hearts don't just correlate, they track each other, moment to moment, like two instruments hunting the same tempo. It has been reported in romantic partners sitting in silence, in close friends in conversation, most powerfully of all, in mothers and infants, where studies describe the two heart rhythms locking together within moments of warm, face-to-face contact, the baby's tempo, and the mothers finding each other and holding on. Researchers call this physiological synchrony, and before your skeptic alarm fires, good, keep it on. You've earned it tonight. Notice what makes this different from everything in part 1. There is no spooky channel here, and no need for one. The signal path is completely visible. Her face reaches you through light. Her breathing reaches you through sound. Her warmth through your skin, her rhythm through the mattress, her scent, her micro-expressions, the pace of her voice. Your senses are drinking a fire hose of information from a person you're near, and your nervous system, tuned by millions of years of social evolution, adjusts itself to what it drinks. Presence is the mechanism, which is exactly why this survives where the first story fell. It's carried by ordinary physics, so it replicates like ordinary physics. It fades with distance, as real channels do. It strengthens with attention and closeness, as real channels do. It obeys the light speed rules because it's made of light and sound and touch, and it goes deeper than resting rhythm. In one line of studies, reported, promising, still young, one partner is subjected to pain while the other holds their hand. The reports are remarkable twice over. The hand-holding couples' rhythms and brain activity couple together more strongly, and the pain itself is dulled, with the coupling and the relief reported strongest in the most empathic partners. Read that plainly. Another person's presence, delivered through skin and attention, measurably reorganizing what your body does with pain. No telepathy, and somehow better than telepathy. Not a message through the void, a hand doing what hands have always done, now visible on the instruments. So, this is the true bonded pair effect, the one that replicates. The Princeton basement reported that love moved machines that vanished under scrutiny. What the instruments actually find is that love moves you, that two people who share a life become, physiologically, a weakly coupled system, two pendulums on the same beam, forever nudging each other toward a shared tempo. The field has a name for the wider research program, hyperscanning, recording two or more brains at once while people interact, something that only became practical in recent decades. And its most consistent reported finding is almost embarrassingly beautiful. When one person tells a story and another truly listens, The listener's brain activity begins to track the speakers, rising and falling in coupled waves, the listening brain partially reenacting the telling brain, with the coupling reported strongest exactly when the listener understands best. Poor listening, distraction, a language you don't speak, the coupling loosens. Deep understanding, it tightens. And in some analyses, the most engaged listeners' brains even ran slightly ahead of the speaker, anticipating where the story was going. Classroom studies have reported the same texture at group scale. The degree to which students' brain rhythms moved together tracked how engaged they were with the lesson and each other. Now, the honest hedge, because this channel keeps its promises. This is a young field. The effects vary between studies, and every bit of it is carried by ordinary sensory channels. Voices, faces, shared rhythm and attention. Nothing spooky is on offer, but something real is, a first scientific glimpse of what being on the same wavelength measures out to two nervous systems, driven by the same stream of shared experience, phase locking like two clocks on one wall. And here, at last, the strangest report from the Princeton basement gets its honest home. Remember what PEAR's best volunteers described, that they weren't pushing the machine, that the boundary went soft, that self and other seemed to merge into one system. I told you that feeling would come back wearing different clothes. The numbers those volunteers generated did not survive the checking. The feeling was real, all along. A softening of the self-other boundary during absorbed, connected attention is exactly what people report. In deep conversation, in synchronized music making, in prayer, between mother and infant, and it's during exactly those states that the instruments record two bodies and brains most tightly coupled. The volunteers in that basement were experiencing something true about human connection. They were just aiming it at the wrong receiver. It never moved the machine. It moves us. And once you see the coupling, the shared dreams stop being spooky and start being inevitable. Walk it through. You share a bed, so tonight's dreams are built by two brains marinating in the same physical night. The same storm on the same window. The same siren at 2 a.m. The same too warm room. The same dog on the stairs, and sleeping brains audibly, measurably weave the night's real sounds into their dreams. You shared a day, and dreams are made of days. Sleep. Science's oldest solid finding is that dreams recycle the dreamer's recent waking life. The day's residue surfacing that night and echoing again about a week later. But you didn't just have similar days. You had the same day, the same dinner table argument, the same money worry, the same episode of the same show, the same phone call about the same relative, and you shared the telling, the conversation before sleep that planted the same last image in both heads, and the conversation after waking, where, remember the curator, two foggy, half-remembered dreams get compared, and in the comparing, get aligned. Your house borrows their doorway, their water floods your rooms, and the version you both retell forever is the merged one. And sleeping brains don't just remember the shared day, they're still listening to the shared night. And this has been shown in some of the most charming experiments in sleep science. For decades, researchers have crept up on dreaming sleepers and gently meddled with their senses. A fine mist of water on the skin, a tone played softly, a lamp brightening near the eyes, a name whispered. Then they wake the sleeper and ask for the dream. Again and again, the intrusion is in there, not as itself, but translated. The water mist becomes a dream of sudden rain, a leaking roof, standing under a waterfall. The tone becomes a phone, ringing in the dream's kitchen, You've run this experiment on yourself without meaning to. The morning alarm that became, for a few merciful seconds, a fire drill in the dream school, a doorbell in the dream house, your sleeping brain frantically writing the sound into the plot to protect the story. Now put two sleepers in one bed and let the world meddle with them together. The same thunder at 2 a.m., the same siren, the same radiator clank, the same dog turning circles on the floorboards. One broadcast, two dreaming brains, each obliged to write tonight's shared soundtrack into its script. When a storm rolls over the house and you both wake from dreams of water, nothing whispered between your minds. The sky whispered to both of you, and you each took dictation. Researchers have even learned to steer this on purpose. In sleep laboratories, playing a sound during the night that was earlier tied to something learned, or drifting a particular scent through the room, has been reported to bias what the sleeping brain rehearses, and even to nudge the content of dreams toward a chosen theme. They call it cueing, and it's studied as a memory tool. But notice what it means for our question. Dream content is steerable from outside by ordinary sights, sounds, and smells attached to the day's experience. Two people who share a bedroom are cueing each other's dreams every night of their lives, with the perfume on the pillow, the murmured half-conversation at midnight, the same lamp clicking off, a lifelong, accidental, two-way dream-steering experiment that no laboratory could ever afford to run. Two brains, trained every single night on the same data, fed the same sensory stream, the same worries, the same stories, the same sleeping soundscape for years. You and the person you love are not two random dreamers from the 8 billion. You are two instruments trained on the same music. Of course, you sometimes play the same phrase in the dark. The miracle was never that your dreams collide. The miracle is the shared life that loaded the deck, and you built that with your own hours. And now, the twins. I told you at the start of the night to hold on to them, and here is where they stop being a mystery and become the proof. Because ask the honest question first. Has twin telepathy ever shown up in a laboratory? It has been hunted earnestly for the better part of a century. Twins separated into different rooms, one shown images, or given mild shocks, or asked to send, the other guessing or wired to instruments. And the record, review after review, comes back the same way the rest of tonight's second chapters did. No reliable effect. Under controlled conditions, twins guess like everyone else at chance. Whatever is producing their extraordinary stories, it is not a private channel between their minds. But now look at what twins actually are, through everything you've learned tonight, and watch every piece click into place at once. Identical twins are two brains built from the same genetic blueprint, which means matched temperaments, matched fears, matched tastes, even substantially matched body clocks, so they're prone to being tired, hungry, worried, and dreaming on the same schedule. Then life stacks the deck further. Raised in the same house, often the same bedroom, the same dinners, the same schools, the same summers, the same griefs, on the same days. A childhood so shared that their day residue, the raw material of dreaming, has been near identical for decades. They are two instruments not just trained on the same music, but built in the same workshop from the same wood. And on top of all that, they run the richest mutual simulations on Earth, each carrying a model of the other, trained on a whole life of data, capable of predicting the other's choices, moods, even words, with an accuracy that feels like mind reading, because it is the honest version of mind reading, knowing someone completely. Same blueprint, same training data, same nightly soundscape for years, plus the world's most detailed model of each other, plus Remember the mathematics. A lifetime of pair checking, because twins compare notes about everything, forever. Run the shared deck theory forward, and it makes a hard prediction. The people who should report the most shared dreams, the most impossible timings, the most same gift, same week collisions, are identical twins, more than couples, more than best friends, more than anyone. And that is exactly, famously, what we find. The twins were never evidence for telepathy. They were always the strongest evidence for the real mechanism, a full-scale demonstration of what enough shared life does to two nervous systems. The first story looked at twins and saw a quantum link. Look again. What you're seeing is the deepest possible attunement, and it was built the same way yours was, just earlier and all the way down. And before that last one, the phone call deserves its own final secret, because there's a mechanism hiding inside. I was just thinking about you, that almost nobody notices. You and the people you love are not thinking independently. You're plugged into the same broadcasts, the same monsoon, breaking over the same city, the same headline pushed to both your phones in the same minute, the same festival arriving, the same song the radio decides to play everywhere today, the same anniversary the calendar serves you both at midnight. Each of these is a mass cue, one signal delivered simultaneously to millions of minds, and your minds don't respond to cues randomly. A song from the summer you shared fires the same memory in both of you. A news story about her city fires, a thought of her in you, and a thought of calling home in her. The world is constantly ringing bells that you two, and only you two, are tuned to answer with each other. So when the thought and the call collide, I was literally just thinking about you. Very often, neither of you started it. Some third thing rang first. The weather, the date, the song, the news, one bell, two heads, and a phone call that feels like telepathy and is actually a duet, cued by a conductor neither of you noticed. Add the rhythm of contact itself, you think about people more in the seasons you're in touch, which is exactly when they're most likely to call, and the impossible timing starts looking less like a miracle of minds, and more like what it is, two lives so interwoven that even their random thoughts keep time. One more, and then we can rest. Have you ever felt someone looking at you, that prickle of attention on the back of your neck? A beat before you turn, and there they are, eyes on you. Here's the honest record. When that feeling has been tested cold, starers behind you at randomized moments. All ordinary cues sealed away, the detection performs at chance. There is no ray touching your neck, but the feeling isn't a malfunction, and here's what it actually is. Your brain runs simulations of the people around you, where they are, what they want, where their attention points, updated constantly from crumbs. A reflection in a window, a chair's creak, footsteps pausing. The social logic of the room. Mostly those simulations hum below awareness. Sometimes one crosses the threshold as a wordless certainty. Someone's looking. You turn. Sometimes you're right. The crumbs were real. And with no one there, the feeling dissolves unrecorded. Another miss the curator never files. But do you see what you're actually carrying? A brain that runs live models of other minds, and that runs its richest, most detailed model of the person it loves. You carry a simulation of them, trained on years of data, and it never stops running. It predicts their moods before they speak, hears the wrongness in a two-word text, wakes you, yes. At 3 a.m., when some pattern your waking mind, never consciously registered, finally sums to alarm in the model. Sometimes the model is wrong, and the curator kindly forgets. And sometimes the model is right, not because their fear crossed the dark to find you, but because you know them, because the version of them that lives in you is that good. One more thing before the end, about what to actually do with your synchronicities now. Because I know how nights like this can feel, as if knowledge came in and carried something out while you watched. It didn't. Here's what I'd offer instead. Keep noticing them, truly. The coincidences will keep coming. The mathematics guarantees your ration of small miracles, delivered monthly for life, free of charge. And noticing them is one of the cleaner joys available to a human being. When the song lands at the perfect moment, when the stranger turns out to share your grandmother's name, when you and someone you love surface from the same dream, let it delight you. Delight requires no theory. You don't have to build a moment to the universe for it to be worth the gasp. And tell them, that part matters more than people know. A coincidence told is a small gift between people. It says, notice this strange world with me. The Victorian census, Camera's notebooks, Jung's files, your family's 3M story. Underneath all of it, humans handing each other astonishment. That practice is worth keeping forever. And one thing worth knowing about the weather of it, synchronicities cluster in the storms. People report far more of them in grief, in love, in crisis, in the great transitions. The first story read, that clustering as the universe, drawing closer when you need it. Here's the honest reading, and I don't think it's colder. In those seasons, your attention is cranked wide open, your emotions are tagging everything as significant, and your mind is hungry, actively hunting for pattern, for signal, for a hand on the shoulder, so it finds more. That is your meaning-making system, doing precisely its job, working overtime in exactly the hours you need meaning most. A mind that lights up the world with significance when its person is drowning, that's not a flaw to correct. That's equipment to be grateful for. Just hold it with both hands, enjoy the lights, and know that you are the lighthouse. And there's one place this whole night lands most tenderly, so let me set it down with care. The dreams of the people we've lost. If you've grieved someone, you may know these dreams. They are among the most common experiences in bereavement, reported by a majority of grieving people in study after study. The person arrives in a dream, vivid and well, often younger, often at peace, sometimes saying exactly the thing you needed said. People wake from them shaken and comforted at once, and many find themselves wondering, was that a visit? Tonight's honest framework holds this one gently and gives back more than it takes. Remember what you carry, a model of them trained on years, decades of shared life, the richest simulation your brain ever built. Death does not delete it. The model runs on, and in dreams, with the day's noise gone, it can run at full fidelity. Their voice right, their laugh right, the particular way they tilt their head, because all of that is truly in you, learned and kept. Nothing crossed from anywhere in those dreams, nothing needed to. What you met was real, the realest thing that remains, the version of them you spent a lifetime recording, still faithful, still capable of surprising you, still able to say the thing they would have said. Grief researchers report that these dreams tend, over time, to help, and no wonder, they are the echo, at its most merciful, your longest call, still returning. And if the pattern hunting ever stops feeling like wonder and starts feeling like a compulsion that runs you, that's the moment to talk to someone you trust. Even good equipment deserves care. So let's answer the question we lit the candle with. What is actually connecting you? Not a particle. The one door physics ever seemed to open. Physics itself closed. The deepest connection in nature turns out to be provably silent, correlated but mute, and nothing rides it. 50 years of laboratories, could not make one reproducible whisper cross between two sealed minds. And yet you are connected, more concretely than the first story ever dared to claim. Connected by arithmetic. Of all the pairs in the world, you're the pair that shares a deck and compares hands. Connected by a visible channel with staggering bandwidth, light, sound, warmth, touch, presence, through which two nervous systems have been tuning each other measurably for years. Connected by data, every shared day is a training day, and you have thousands. And connected by the models you carry, a working copy of them running in you, a working copy of you running in them. Each one refined by every meal and argument, an ordinary Tuesday, until it can finish sentences, and predict tears, and wake in the night, on cue. There's an old ordinary word for what you two have been doing all these years, and tonight it can finally carry its full weight. You are each other's echo. Not copies. An echo is never a copy. Call out in a canyon, and what returns is your own voice, changed by everything it touched, shifted, softened, shaped by the rock. That's what the shared dream is. The same day, sent into two different sleeping minds, returning as two versions of one sound. That's what the phone call is. Two lives so rhythmically entwined that reaching out and being reached for keep landing on the same beat. That's even what the 3 a.m. waking is, your own long attention to someone, coming back to you in the dark, carrying news you didn't know you knew. Nothing crossed the void tonight, it never needed to. Every call you've ever sent into that person has been coming back to you for years, changed by them, carrying their shape, and you have been echoing in them just as long. And I'll tell you what I honestly find, weighing the two stories at the end of the night. The first story asked me to believe the universe secretly wired the two of you together, that the connection was installed in the basement of reality. No maintenance required. It's a lovely thought, and it was never true. The true story is better, and here's why. Nothing about your connection was installed. All of it was built. Every degree of that synchrony was earned an hour at a time. The meals, the fights, the boredom, the bed, the 10,000 ordinary days, until two separate nervous systems learn to keep a kind of time together. Entanglement is given to particles. Attunement is built by people. One of those is a physical accident. The other one is the actual love, made visible on the instruments. So tonight, don't listen for a hidden channel. Rest inside the real one. If they're beside you, that sound is the channel working, the breath you've matched 1,000 nights without trying. If they're far away, the model of them is still running in you, warm and detailed and faithfully wrong in the exact ways they'd find funny. And somewhere out there, a version of you is running in them, keeping your voice. And there's one last gift in the honest story, one the enchanted version could never give, so take it with you into sleep. If the connection between you had been quantum, installed, automatic, indestructible, then it would owe nothing to your years, and your years would add nothing to it. But it isn't. And they do. Every shared evening from here on is another training day. Tonight, lying near each other, you are still tuning, hearts still negotiating a tempo, tomorrow's dreams already being loaded from today's shared deck. The connection is alive precisely because it was never guaranteed. It grows when you feed it hours, and that means the two of you aren't finished. You are, right now, mid-echo. Let your breathing slow now. Let the day's residue settle where it wants to. Some of it will surface tonight. In you, maybe in the sleeper beside you, drawn from the same well. Somewhere tonight, two people are about to have the same dream. After everything you now know, the theorems, the basements, the arithmetic, the two hearts hunting one tempo. You know exactly how that happens, and it lost nothing. It was never the universe whispering between you. It was the two of you, echoing. Sleep well.